What's up guys, Hownish here with some Destiny 2 new stuff to talk about. So I want to talk about the upcoming DLC for Destiny 2. We've got some very strong confirmation of the actual location that we'll be visiting. On top of this though, even more interesting, Bungie actually make direct reference to a Comet expansion coming for Destiny 2. I'll talk about that stuff in a moment. In more current news though, it looks like the classic player reputation or the Destiny 1 style ranks will actually be returning to Destiny 2. We're going to be getting more exotic previews coming up soon. There's a bunch of other stuff I wanted to talk about, so let's jump into it. Of course, everyone's been talking about the upcoming DLC for Destiny 2 called Warmind. As of yet, Bungie have only provided us with this one image. Of course, it is a pretty cool image. There's been plenty of speculation about stuff. In terms of the location, this pretty much gives us a confirmation. So on the right-hand side, we can see these two objects orbiting Mars. The brighter object in the forefront actually looks like Deimos or Deimos, which is one of the two moons of Mars, and then the one below that appears to be Phobos. The fact that it isn't kind of pronounced like the one in the foreground could be some kind of, atmospheric thing. And of course, the reason it looks so close to the planet is because the Cabal actually moved the orbit of Phobos. They pulled it closer to Mars. So considering the teases we also got in the Arecibo adventure in Destiny 2, and then another tease from Eric Osborne from Bungie, so he actually replied indeed to a tweet that said Mars is beautiful in the early morning light, snow on the dunes, and they actually show this really cool image of Mars. But the fact that he said this is just more confirmation that we will be going to the ice caps of Mars in this expansion. So I just thought that was worth pointing out. Another interesting thing is if you look at the bunker that we see in the image, you can kind of get an idea of the scale. So if we use the 4K image, you can actually zoom right in at the middle at the bottom here, and you can see a kind of typical Guardian or human-sized door that we see normally in Warmind bunkers in D1 and D2. There's also this kind of platform around the door, which could be a spawn location. We don't know if this is part of the patrol space. It could be a separate thing. Either way, it is a pretty substantial size, this bunker itself. Of course, Bungie are doing their live stream on April the 24th, and Vicarious Visions, another studio, actually tweeted out about this because they will be present during the stream. Vicarious Visions have actually been working with Bungie to develop this expansion. So that's definitely going to be interesting and different as well. But in other news regarding Warmind, you may have heard of another recent leak. I know some folks have made videos about it. There's been quite a lot of conversation on forums and social media, but this one is yet another coming from GameStop. I'm not going to get into it too much because, to be quite honest, I simply don't believe it. There is some interesting stuff. Explore Site 8 on Mars and defend against an army of corrupt Crypt Exo, and ascend the Deep Stone Crypt, which is interesting. A crypt you would normally descend into as opposed to ascend. So I think some of the wording is kind of unusual. Also, on the website, it lists the 8th of April as the pre-download date for this expansion, which of course hasn't happened. So I think you probably already get my 2 cents on that one. Moving on though, there is a very interesting reference in some of Bungie's recent posts about the upcoming Comet expansion for Destiny 2. So of course, players from D1 may remember the Comet, or something that was actually revealed in a supposed internal roadmap that Bungie had kind of built for the future of Destiny 1. And Comet, Plague of Darkness on the original image actually turned out to be the Taken King. But the Bungie Foundation are going to be running their charity Gauntlet. It's something they do, once or twice a year. And one of the rewards if you donate, listed on Bungie's blog, is an unannounced new exclusive emblem at the beginning of Season 4. And that's if you actually donate $50. Of course, we know though that Season 4 is beginning in September. But if we look at the donation page itself, we see something pretty interesting. It's a slightly different version of the same text that says, receive an unannounced new exclusive emblem in the fall for our next Destiny Comet release. So the important thing to take away here is that this is essentially confirmation that we will be getting that big expansion in September. We know that we're getting updates in September currently on the roadmap. And of course, it makes a lot of sense that this would happen because it's what happened in D1. And it's always possible that that timeline, could have changed a little bit this time around. But this is confirmation that that isn't actually the case, and we will get that expansion in September. And it will be the big expansion. Now, why is it called Comet? We also saw that in D1. I think it's basically an internal term that Bungie use for their major expansions for the game. So of course, you have the initial launch, you have the smaller kind of season pass expansions, and then Comet is, like I said, their internal name for the kind of year one major content infusion and rework that they bring into the game. Either way, pretty interesting stuff. Moving on though, somebody tweeted, is there any plan to show us the reputation level in the progress bar? It used to be nice to know, and Chris Barrett actually says signs point to yes. So of course that's confirmation that they are working on actually bringing it into the game, and I think we could see this in the May expansion because there is actually going to be an interesting update that hasn't been spoken about too much, and that will be seasonal vendor progression, where they previously confirmed they will be bringing in seasonal ranks that you can actually attain inside of each vendor or NPC's kind of inventory. And these are season specific ranks, you know, so you might get to rank 8 in season 3 and then it will reset at season 4, but they would actually need a way to show these ranks in the game, so it makes sense that they would then update to show you the overall ranks over time and not just the seasonal ranks. So we could be getting that in May. Not necessarily major to everybody, but I think quite a lot of players really miss actually seeing those levels in game and giving you that sense of progression. Somebody asked on Reddit, any chance we can see a preview of the new and improved Graviton Lance? And DMG said soon. So of course this will probably come in the form of one of the exotic demonstrations inside of the Bungie blog. And with us hearing about some of the changes they're making to these exotics, in particular Graviton, is going to be very interesting. So we can expect to actually get some gameplay of that soon. A couple of other things I wanted to touch on. Joe Blackburn actually gave some insights into the raid death mechanic inside of raids in Destiny 2, and this of course includes revive tokens and things like that. And he said, we like to think about raids as a place to hang out with other Guardians, a place where teamwork and coordination is paramount to success. Revive tokens are an attempt to keep all 5 of your teammates engaged in encounters while still keeping the threat of death relevant. I think the token system the team came up with solved the identified problem space very cleanly, and they've also added a pretty compelling enrage mechanic to each encounter, where we no longer see teams that are destined for failure bleed out over 5 minutes. That doesn't mean that we didn't lose a cool experience in the process though. In the old world, losing someone early meant that the player had to sit out for 6 to 10 minutes, but that fire team also had a cool new problem space. How do we solve this encounter with less people? Who can take over that Guardian's role? Guardians have so much role flexibility in Destiny that trying to solve encounter problems with less people often leads to a really compelling experience. I think the challenge to the team is, can we get some of these experiences back into raids and still keep players engaged during the majority of the fight? Sometimes you can't have your cake and eat it too, so this might be a situation where we have to pick one of these goals and accept the shortcomings, but I just wanted to make sure that our raiders know this is something we're talking about. So definitely some very interesting insights. I can understand that frustration, you know, especially for a solid team if one of your players go down and you're in that position where you're actually going to wipe because you can't revive them. Let me know what you guys think about that below. But finally, I just wanted to touch on something from Yahoo Finance. They're actually talking about Destiny 2 and the fact that it's struggling right now. And this is an interesting statement. They said one of the takeaways here is that the Destiny franchise once again debuted a major installment that was lacking in content, of course in reference to Destiny 2. Some reports suggest that Destiny 2 project was dramatically retooled late in development, which would do a lot to explain that deficiency. However, the objections from the players are not limited to the game being light on things to do. Customers also seem to be dissatisfied with changes to the fundamental gameplay experience, things like how fast players move, character attributes, and enemy variety. Overall, the user base seems to want the game's developer to revert the game's mechanics closer to those of the franchise predecessor. Activision President and Chief Operating Officer Cody Johnson noted during the last earnings call that the game's developer has made changes to the experience and said that they have been positively received by the player base, but that doesn't seem to be the case, even as more dramatic updates have been rolled out. And they described this as a significant misstep for Activision Blizzard. The need to deliver on content front is something the company publicly addressed years before Destiny 2 released, so not having that weakness addressed for the launch of the sequel is a clear failure. Whether or not Destiny 2 experienced significant setback during its development, the product has not met customer expectations, and that has implications for the future of the franchise. So just interesting that Yahoo Finance actually speak about this. Of course, not necessarily majorly significant. A lot of us have already had this conversation, and naturally this is a big deal for Bungie as well. The entire industry is kind of watching to see what happens over the next few months and whether Bungie can claw it back. I personally think they absolutely have the opportunity to. Of course, we don't know what the content coming down the road is actually going to be like. We don't know whether the changes they're talking about will really improve Destiny 2 in the way that we want them to. I guess the main takeaway here though is that it's still very much a topic of conversation and focus, but we'll have to see what happens, guys. Of course, we've got major releases and updates coming down the road, many of which we've just spoken about. So let me know your thoughts on this stuff as always in the comment section. If you have enjoyed the video, a like is very much appreciated. If you're new to the channel, feel free to hit that subscribe button to see a lot more Destiny 2 content. For now though, I will catch you guys very soon.